What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It's time to continue my 2023 schedule preview and projected records for the 2023 college football season, and we continue them with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Here was the schedule last year for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. The overall record for this team going 4-8 overall in 2022, so really big disappointment for Nebraska last year. This is a team that I was really high on heading into 2022. Kind of predicted them to be a top 25 team as well, but they didn't end up being that good as we think they were going to be. You look at who they played in the non-conference. They played North Dakota, Georgia Southern, and Oklahoma. So, again, they didn't have too tough of a non-conference schedule. Of course, North Dakota and Georgia Southern were games that, we thought they would take care of business in. Of course, Georgia Southern, though, they did end up losing that game on September the 10th. And after that game, that kind of told us that Nebraska was going to be a disappointing team heading into 2022. And they did end up losing to Oklahoma there at home as well. So they got blown out in that game. So, yeah, Nebraska just really, a disappointing season last year. And you look at who they played in the Big Ten East. They played Indiana, Rutgers, and Michigan. So they didn't have too tough of a draw there outside of the Big Ten West. Of course, they played every single Big Ten West team on this schedule. And, after that, like I said, after that Georgia Southern game, we knew Nebraska was going to be a really disappointment in 2022. So, yeah, they were a big disappointment in 2022. But, they fired Scott Frost, and, he was one of my top 10 head coaches heading into 2022 on the hot seat. So, but Nebraska, a new era coming in for this team. What would they look like in 2023? Right now, they are a mess right now. They're not one of the worst Big Ten teams in the West right now, but they are really close to that category. So let's now look ahead to 2023. Here's a schedule for Nebraska heading into 2023. You look at who they play in the non-conference this year. They'll play Colorado here on the road. So they do get a Power 5 team once again out of the non-conference. Then they'll play NIU and Louisiana Tech here on September the 23rd. So non-conference schedule is kind of similar to last year. It's not that difficult, but they do have to play a Power 5 team on the schedule, and that's Colorado this year. Last year they played Oklahoma at home, and this year they'll play Colorado on the road out of the Pac-12. So, that's going to be an interesting non-conference game. Both of these teams were a mess last year. Colorado, definitely one of the worst Pac-12 teams from a year ago, but Deion Sanders is really helping that program. That program is heading in the right direction right now, but how good will they be? But this will be a first-season head coaches matchup here between both of these teams in the Big Ten and Pac-12, so I'm looking forward to that matchup in the non-conference. And out of the Big Ten East, let's take a look at Nebraska, who they will play outside of the Big Ten West. Of course, they're going to be playing every single Big Ten West team on this schedule. And, they'll play Michigan here on September the 30th. That's always kind of brutal to play Michigan here every single year on this schedule. And then they'll play Michigan State here on the road on November the 4th. So they'll get Michigan State out of the Big Ten East this year. And then they'll play Maryland at home. So kind of a tough draw there out of the Big Ten East. Michigan State wasn't that good last year, but, this one will be on the road, so that will be a tough place to play. And then Maryland here, they were a decent team last year. Kind of a team that, almost really could have competed in the Big Ten East last year, so they almost get all the top 4 teams from last year. But Michigan State, basically, they're going to be probably an improving team this year, so we'll see how it goes. Let's go game by game now for this Nebraska team. So they'll start the season off with back-to-back road games here. They'll start the season off on August the 31st here on the road at Minnesota. So this will be a tough road game to start out the year of 2023, especially with a first-year head coach. We don't know how good this Nebraska team is going to be. A Minnesota team, though, that is well-experienced. They were a well-experienced team last year. Could be a step back for them this year, but we never know about Minnesota. They could be a sneaky good team in the Big Ten West. And then they'll play Colorado after that out of the Pac-12 here in the non-conference on September the 9th. So there's a pretty good chance that Nebraska, that could start out 0-2, maybe 1-1. They probably somehow win one of those road games, but anyways, they'll play NIU after that on September the 16th. Then they'll play Louisiana Tech here on September 23rd. And then they'll play Michigan here on September the 30th. So they really have a tough schedule heading into the month of September, especially, early in the season with Minnesota, Colorado. Minnesota game is in August, but, Colorado and Michigan in the month of September, those are very tough games. Then they'll play Illinois here on the road on October the 7th. They'll get a bye week after playing that game, and then they'll play Northwestern here on October the 21st. One of the worst Big Ten teams from last year. Of course, Nebraska got beat by Northwestern in the game in Ireland, and this is kind of like a revenge game for Nebraska, so I'm kind of expecting Nebraska to, be ready for this one. But it will be a tough game there. It'll probably be back and forth. You never know. Then they'll play Purdue here on October 28th. And then they'll play Michigan State here on November the 4th. Then they'll play Maryland here on November the 11th. Then they'll play Wisconsin here on the road on November the 18th. And then they'll end things out here with Iowa on November the 24th. That will be a Friday night game, so looking forward to that matchup. Nebraska did beat them last year, so that was the only quality win in the Big Ten that they had from a year ago. Iowa was, not really good either. They weren't good on that offensive side of the ball, but, they should be better this year. Of course, Cade McNamara coming in, the transfer from Michigan, is going to help them out. So, but the schedule overall for Nebraska, a pretty tough one, especially with Colorado out of the non-conference. But other than that, the schedule is not too difficult. They do have some tough road games in the Big Ten, especially with Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan State, and Wisconsin. So we'll see how that plays out, though. Let's now get to the projection here for this Nebraska team. This is the scale I use. If it's a 1% game, these are games where Nebraska has no chance of winning in. 20% games in the orange. These are games where Nebraska is going to be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs. 40% in the yellow. These are games where Nebraska is going to be about a touchdown of an underdog. They're going to be about a heavy underdog in some of these games. And then 50-50 games. These will stay in the white. Games where they can go either way. 60% games. These will stay in the purple. Games where Nebraska is going to be favored by at least a touchdown. 80% games will be favored by a couple touchdowns, like double digits. And then 90% games, these are games where Nebraska is going to be favored by more than 3 touchdowns. And those are easy wins as well, the 90% category. So we're going to start with the green games here. The easy wins for Nebraska in the 90% category here in the green. And I think you got 2 of those on the schedule in the month of September. That's NIU and Louisiana Tech here. I think you got 2 of these games where Nebraska is going to be big-time favorites heading into both of these games. I know Nebraska lost to Georgia Southern last year, but the good news is they don't really have to play a group of 5 team that is going to be a little bit better than we thought they were going to be. So, but, I think Nebraska will be favored by at least, more than 3 touchdowns in both of these games. So I think, you can roll over in both of these games and you can favor Nebraska by at least more than 3 touchdowns. Louisiana Tech, I think will be probably closer to 90%, but, I think as of right now, both of these games are over 95%, so I'm kind of expecting Nebraska to roll over in both of these games. How about the games now where Nebraska is going to be favored by a couple touchdowns? I don't have any blue games, but I do have a purple game on this schedule. The games where Nebraska is going to be favored by at least a touchdown. I think you got one game on that schedule. Like I said, it's Northwestern here on October the 21st. Northwestern, from where they were from last year, I have to put this one in the purple. I know it's a game where Nebraska is going to be home, and also they got beat by them last year, but Northwestern, obviously one of the worst Big Ten teams from a year ago. That's why I got to put this one in the purple, but it could switch to a 50-50 game by the time we do those predictions in the month of May. But as of right now, I can favor Nebraska in this game by at least a touchdown. And, basically I don't have any blue games here on the schedule because the schedule, the way it sets up, I really don't see Nebraska being, double-digit favorites in any of these games here on the schedule. So we go to the games now where they're going to be underdogs in. I don't have any red or orange games, surprisingly, but I do have some yellow games on the schedule, and that's almost the majority of their schedule here in the 40% category in the yellow. I got Minnesota on the road, Michigan at home, Illinois on the road, Michigan State on the road, and then Wisconsin on the road. So I think all these games Nebraska will be a heavy underdog in. I think they do have a really good shot to win some of these games here on the road. Minnesota, obviously, that's a early kickoff game, but Minnesota, I think, you never know about Nebraska. They could probably surprise some people and probably beat them on the road. And then Michigan, that's a game that I probably could have put in the orange, but I'm going to stick with it and put it in the yellow. Illinois, this will be a back-and-forth game with Nebraska. I think I'm going to put this one in the yellow as well. And then Michigan State and Wisconsin are both kind of similar. They weren't good teams last year. Like, Michigan State was a disappointment last year. That's why I got to put this one in the yellow. But with home field advantage, I'm going to say that Michigan State will be at least the favorite heading into this game. And then, of course, Wisconsin, I think they'll be at least favored as well because they're at home. But both of those teams were kind of disappointing last year with Wisconsin and Michigan State. And then, the rest of the games here on the schedule. Colorado, Purdue, Maryland, and Iowa, these are all games where I think there can go either way. Colorado's on the road, and then you got Purdue, Maryland, and Iowa at home. So I think all these games are 50-50 games where they can go either way. Colorado, we don't know how good they're going to be, and we just don't know how good this Nebraska team is going to be. Colorado, the same thing with them, like Nebraska. We just don't know how good they're going to be. But this program, I think, is heading in the right direction with Deion Sanders. And then, of course, Purdue here. This will be a home game for them. And this one's a tough one to call because Purdue's going to have a new head coach, and we don't know how good they're going to be. And then Maryland here, I can't really put this one in the yellow because, I just never know about Maryland either. I don't know how good they're going to be sometimes, but, I think at least Nebraska will be, a 50-50 game right here with Maryland. And then, of course, Iowa, they beat Iowa last year, so that's why I'm going to put it here in the 50-50 game. So how many games do I see them winning at least out of those 50-50 games? Well, maybe they can lose, to Colorado on the road, and there's a good chance they start out 0-2 on the season, just like I said, but I think the rest of the games here in the home games, in the 50-50 games, maybe they can win those games. You never know against Purdue, Maryland, and Iowa. It's a good chance they can win all three of these games because the teams are kind of better in the late month of October and the late month of November. But we just don't know how good this Nebraska team is going to be. They weren't good last year. They were a mess, but with a first-year head coach now, how good will this Nebraska team be? But let's get to the projection now for this Nebraska team. This is not my official prediction. This is simply a projection based on the schedule. And if you look at the games that Nebraska's favored in and also the games that are underdog games like the yellow games, and then, of course, you got the 50-50 games, you get an overall projected record for this Nebraska team at 6-6 for 2023. So 6-6 as of right now is the projection for this Nebraska team. I think that's kind of a decent and fair projection for this Nebraska team. I think most Nebraska fans will probably say they go 6-6 or maybe 7-5 or maybe 5-7 in their first year with their first-year head coach. So, Nebraska's got a lot of question marks. We just don't know how good they're going to be. They lost a ton of talent, in the transfer portal perhaps as well. So we just don't know how good this team is going to be. But let me guys know what you think about this Nebraska team. Let me give me your thoughts. What do you think their best case scenario would be? What do you think their worst case scenario would be for 2023? And stay tuned here for more sports content on the Lucas Ross Sports Channel.